What does a semiotic frame of mind got to do with design or illustration? Well, whether you are an illustrator or a designer, you are a visual communicator. With each aesthetic decision you take, the visual language you craft is communicating something to someone. In the following 3 episodes, we will see how you can control this more effectively by applying semiosis in your ideation and reconsidering your existing creative mindset. Welcome to the first Omnibus edition from Semiosis 101's Season 4. In this Omnibus, I collect the first 3 episodes of Semiosis 101 Season 4 into a single edition. These 3 episodes can be watched back to back in this edition on the subject of a semiotic frame of mind. If you've watched any Semiosis 101 episodes before, then you already know I am Dave Wood, and I explain Charles Sanders Peirce's semiotic theory of semiosis, sign action, in designer-centric terms. Season 4's overall semiotic theme is on developing a new semiotic mindset to help enhance how you visually communicate. Semiosis 101 will build your confidence to apply semiotic sign action into your own designs or illustrations to enhance how you visually communicate. Why do you need Semiosis 101? Peirce's semiotic writing and terminology is unfortunately very obtuse. After all, we study design and illustration and not philosophy, so we need theory centered to creatives' needs. Yes, that is why you need Semiosis 101. So subscribe and let us jump straight into a semiotic frame of mind. Straight away, in this first episode of Semiosis 101 Season 4, we are attempting something seismic. You are aware of the trick of whipping away a tablecloth while the plates, cups and cutlery stay in place? Yes? Well, that is metaphorically what Semiosis 101 intends to do for you designers and illustrators this season. I will be revealing a semiotic frame of mind to you all whilst you keep your existing creative process in place. This is more than a sleight of hand on my part for me to show how Charles Sanders Peirce's semiotic theory of semiosis maps to your existing creative process. Semiosis enhances how you visually communicate to audiences. This all begins very early on during what I will call your ideation phase. You may just call this sketching. So as illustrators and designers, you all produce outcomes that visually communicate something to someone. You all learned your skill sets and apply them with each new job. Some of you learned these skills at design and art school. Applying semiotics is not relearning what you know. On Semiosis 101, I focus on enhancing your skill sets with designer-centric knowledge of semiotic sign action. Charles Sanders Peirce names this semiosis. As creatives, you have your own creative process established, if you are a professional, or you are still developing one. You may each use different media, which is great, but what unites you all is that you are all visual communicators. The moment you begin to visualize ideas, the marks you make, however crude, are already meaning bearing. That meaning then matures as the design or illustration develops. As creatives, meaning is visually communicated whether you intend it or not. This is how sophisticated and rich creative outputs can visually communicate at different levels. It is also how miscommunication can happen. Every designer and illustrator has been working semiotically, but you have been doing this tacitly, instinctively, and more likely, blindly. Semiosis is a pragmatic semiotic theory predicated on, at a macro level, what the client needs to be communicated, how the creative renders this, and how the target audience perceives and understands this. We visually communicate in essentially 2 ways: denotatively, this means this, and connotatively, this means that now. Semiosis is the semiotic framework where you can move from an obvious meaning to sophisticated messaging. At a micro level, semiosis enhances your visual language to hook and retain audience attention. Semiotic sign action at a micro level in designer-centric terms follows a determination flow of concept, representation, interpretation. Peirce's original terms are more obtuse than that. The designer's or illustrator's role is to visually communicate the message, concept, through how they design or illustrate, representation. However, the interpretation is in the hands of the audience. Meanings and messaging are always more than simply denotative. In visual communication design, you designers and illustrators are dealing with subtleties of tone of voice, emotional connections, and creating the correct vibe for the subject and audience. You naturally visually communicate connotatively. Applying a semiotic structure to your connotative approach helps you to craft the most effective visual meaning-bearing elements in your designs or illustrations. Peirce's semiotic sign action provides you with ways to visually calibrate the communication of deeper meanings. Do you remember that Peirce says that nothing is a semiotic sign until it is interpreted? Every mark you make has the potential to be meaning-bearing. It is dormant until perceived as meaning something. This is how the visual language you choose can be enhanced to convey what is meant to be visually communicated, the concept, or it can miscommunicate. Semiosis can begin at the simplest level with mere qualities as semiotic signs to trigger the perception process. Let us now turn to the moment your visual language can semiotically turn from dormant to active interpretation. Hopefully you have understood that your crafting of the visual language you use in your illustrations or designs is already semiotically rich. By applying semiosis, you can control how that visual language makes stronger connections with your audience. Obviously, Peirce never wrote his theory with designers and illustrators in mind. Therefore, his writing and terminology is very obtuse and needs heavy contextualization. That is why Semiosis 1.1 exists. In Peirce's semiosis, there is a triadic determination flow between three states: what needs to be communicated, concept; how it is semiotically conveyed, representation; and how this is perceived by the audience, interpretation. Triads, threes, are central to this flow. These interconnected states ensures that semiotic sign action is powered even in the weakest semiotic signs of mere qualities. Each of these three states are in turn individually powered by an internal triad, e.g. iconic and lexical symbolic representation level, from simple to complex. Peirce defines 10 sign classes from simple to complex, which explain how something can be semiotically communicated. Check out my season 3 episodes. The powering of these semiotic signs can be summarized in design-centric terms as the result of how a sign's meaning-bearing capabilities are perceived, communicated, and delivered. A semiotic sign for something can therefore be perceived, communicated, and delivered by manipulating the intensity of each of these capabilities. If you want to visually communicate this, insert whatever you need here, you can control how your audience will perceive, communicate, and deliver this in your designs or illustrations. If you want to read more about these power levels, check out the Semiosis 101 semiotic resource on Ghost. Link is below in the description. To effectively visually communicate this in your creative work to your target audience is not laborious nor magic. Semiosis' triads help you to proactively connect with your audience. I will now summarise how. Peirce's theory of semiotics comes from a pragmatic philosophical ground rather than a structuralist linguistic form of semiotics. Peirce's semiosis is rooted within phenomenology, and this helps creatives to focus on how you can connect with your audiences. If visual communication, as framed within a pragmatic semiotic lens, crafts its visual language of marks, colours, qualities to convey meaning, then semiosis has an actionable framework to enhance its success. For any audience to understand what they see, they interpret meaning from the visuals. Meaning is dormant until perceived, but this perceptual change is in the audience. The design or illustration has not changed in any way. The visual language has just triggered a change in the mind of the audience. This was that. Now, this is this other thing. Semiosis' semiotic sign action begins. As designers and illustrators, you create. What and how you create your work at a micro level is the layering of simple qualities to form more complex designs and illustrations. A brushstroke can indicate a tree, the wind, a nose, etc. A swoosh could form a glyph, a graphic, a logo, etc. These weak and ephemeral qualities are your semiotic micro-level visual communication building blocks of meaning. They form what Peirce calls qualisigns, one-off meaning-bearing triggers. Qualisigns are fleeting. Qualisigns help break the dormancy of perception through contextual, familiar possibilities. The quality, e.g. redness, in itself will always be weakly meaning-bearing until more can be interpreted. Only Peirce's Class 1 signs are qualisigns. Once triggered, these Class 1 signs instantly and subconsciously move the audience to Class 2 of semiotic signs. So, how do we visually communicate this? The this in this question being whatever you need to visually communicate. Firstly, we visually communicate this from weak semiotic qualities that are possibly familiar to your audience. Deeper meaning lies dormant, in plain sight, in your designs and illustrations. If the audience can be contextually guided, then these qualities can instantly become the perceptual triggers for the audience. Secondly, once a semiotic quality piques audience interest, then they can begin to interpret more subtle concepts from the representations within your crafted visual language. We will expand on this in the next episode, so subscribe to be notified when this next free episode is published, or become a Semiosis 101 producer on Patreon and watch all future episodes months ahead of YouTube, plus exclusive goodies. Hint hint. In this second episode of Semiosis 101 Season 4, we are boxing clever with a way to understand how semiotic sign action works. Before we lift the lid on pragmatic semiotic sign action, let us just consider a fundamental point of semiotics. The audience needs to interpret the concept that the creator is representing through the creative's aesthetic crafting of the visual language they have chosen. Charles Sanders Peirce asserts that nothing is a semiotic sign until interpreted as a sign for something. Therefore, you illustrators and designers are in a communicational situation with your target audience to convey meaning within this triadic determination flow between concept, representation, interpretation. You can think of the first two as what your client needs communicating and the visual language you choose, where levels of meaning are semiotically layered. To understand how visual meaning bearing is semiotically layered, let us focus on 3 pointers. Firstly, every innocent mark you make has the potential to be meaning bearing. These marks are the basic visual communication building blocks you already use. Peirce refers to weak meaning bearing qualities as qualisigns. Qualisigns are effectively ephemeral visual semiotic triggers based on context and familiarities. They deliver a semiotic hint at deeper meaning. If they are never triggered, then any encoded meaning remains dormant, yet in plain sight. If qualisigns trigger the audience's perception toward further interpretations or not, the design or illustration remains aesthetically unchanged. Secondly, semiotic signs are not tangible things. They are elements within your visual language encoded to mean something to someone, only when perceived and interpreted. These are 2 pointers, so what is the third? Hopefully you have already grasped from how I have explained semiosis so far that my third pointer is glaringly obvious. As designers and illustrators, you have always been working semiotically, just not with any structure. To get our heads around the triadic three's structure of semiosis' determination flow, let us focus on the concept. The concept is my designer-centric analog term to Peirce's more obtuse object. For brevity, I use the singular term, but a concept is stratified in the meanings or messages that needs to be communicated. At a macro example level, it's useful to think of concept as what your client needs your work to visually communicate. Your client's brief may give this, but any illustration or design will also have to consider at a micro level the tone of voice. If text is present in your design or illustration, that will say one thing, but your design or illustration will provide further messaging about the concept. We are not concerned with denotational meaning, this is this. A whole page spread could communicate dog, but the design and illustration would naturally provide more visual context to visually communicate the concept of dog. The chosen visual language within the page spread's aesthetic composition would add personality and other visual information associated with the concept of dog, such as breed, sex, nature, fur, size, energy levels, cuteness, fierceness, colouring, etc. Dog still remains the concept, supported by visual clues that an audience can see. They may never perceive and interpret all the visual clues, but there will be enough in the page spread for everyone to interpret something. How our concept example of dog is visually communicated is up to the designer or illustrator. What information about dog is interpreted is up to the audience's lived experiences. What if the audience has no experience of such a thing as a dog? Okay, I am being flippant here, but this is where the semiotic determination flow leads us to representation. This is controlled by the creative through the visual language they choose to visually communicate the concept to an audience. Let us stay with our dog example to explore semiotic representation. I like dogs. In our hypothetical page spread, you can write dog and people will read dog. It will not be exciting. As soon as you, as a creative, begin to consider how to creatively convey dog, you are beginning to work semiotically. Is our dog large or small? Is it hairy or sleek? Is it fierce or friendly? To visually communicate this, you will use appropriate visual language to represent these qualities aesthetically. The marked shapes, colours and qualities you select all have the potential to convey the message you want or miscommunicate it. You are used to doing this in your creative practice during ideation to arrive at the best solution. Whether you creators have realised that yes, you are already unconsciously working semiotically. You are already encoding semiotic signs into your aesthetics that your audience can interpret as meaning-bearing. But are you aware of this? Semiosis means semiotic sign action. By being aware of your target audience's lived experiences helps you craft your visual language to help the audience to successfully interpret the intended concept. Semiotic representation is my designer-centric analogue term for Peirce's more obtuse representiment term. Each of these three structures of semiosis has an internal power structure from simple to complex. In representation's case, we semiotically have iconic, indexical and symbolic representation levels. See the relevant YouTube playlist for further information. Or if you want to read more about these levels of power, then check out the Semiosis 1.1 semiotic resource on Ghost. Link is below in the description. After representation comes interpretation. Interpretation is my designer-centric analogue term for Peirce's more obtuse interpretant term. This is the effect of the representation of the concept on the mind of the audience. Will they perceive and interpret the intended meaning? Or will they perceive from the representation a completely unintended meaning? Or completely fail to interpret anything? Interpretation and what is perceived is dependent on the audience and their lived experience they bring to what they see. If they have no experience of a thing called a dog, they obviously cannot be expected to understand what they see, no matter how well you creators can visualize a dog. Get my point? If people do not know, they do not know. Peirce refers to the act of interpreting as having three states: an immediate state, a dynamic state, and a final state. The immediate state requires a sense of familiarity from qualities as possible indicators to things already known to the audience. While there has been criticism in the design literature of semiotics excluding human agency, I make the case that semiosis that semiotic sign action attends to audience's agency. With a clear third of the triadic sign action power aligned to audience interpretation, semiosis is more than semiology's signifier and signified. As illustrators and designers, your representation of the concept has an effect on the mind of the audience. They have agency to interpret what they will. Semiosis helps to align that interpretation to the intended concept. Finally, we arrive at the box. Roderick Munday coins this metaphor for semiosis in Chandler's book. I found it very useful as a visualizer of what I have just discussed. So let us end this episode on the semiosis box of tricks. We have a closed box with something inside it. We look at the box, which provides us a visual clue to what is inside. We can then imagine what is inside. But is it? The box is the semiotic sign, the representation. What is inside is the concept, and what we imagine is inside is the interpretation. In our mind's eye is what we imagine the concept or not. In our metaphor, we open the box, interpret the representation, to discover playing cards, the concept. If we arrive at another interpretation, then the representation has miscommunicated. In the next episode, we will focus on how a small perspective change in the creative during ideation can minimize miscommunications. Remember to subscribe to Semiosis 101 on YouTube to be notified when this is published, or become a Semiosis 101 producer on Patreon and watch all future episodes months ahead of YouTube, plus a full Redux episode archive with other exclusive Patreon only video content and a Semiosis 101 publisher credit. Hint hint. Perception leads to interpretation, which leads to understanding. So in our third episode of Semiosis 101 Season 4, we will make small tweaks in your own perception on how you semiotically ideate. Semiosis 101 is also taking a semantic turn in how I explain Peirce's semiotic sign action to designers and illustrators. It is not enough to develop and sketch potential ideas to answer a client's brief without considering effective visual meaning bearing. In his 2005 design, The Semantic Turn, Klaus Krippendorf describes meaning and perception succinctly. Meaning, on a most basic level, meaning restores perceived differences between what is sensed and what seems to be happening. Perception, meaning arises in the awareness of the possibility of different ways of seeing. Understanding our audience's perceptions is crucial in semiotically crafting effective visual communication. For our audience to perceive the intended meanings visually communicated in our work, we need to semiotically facilitate this. In terms of applied semiotic sign action, we craft our visual language from familiar qualities which possibly could indicate aspects of this. Insert whatever you need here. It is our audience as interpreters of meaning who will deem what is familiar to possibly indicate something more complex. Let me give a quick and broad cultural example. Whiteness as a quality. In Western cultures, we can interpret white as indicating purity, amongst other things. In Eastern cultures, white is perceived to be a colour for mourning. It still remains white. Audiences learn that one quality can be X, while for others it could mean Z. Culturally, our audience's lived experiences, life worlds, can be very helpful to you creatives. Life worlds is a phenomenological term, and Peirce's semiosis is structured within a phenomenological understanding of human perceptions. Peirce's semiotic sign action is predicated on the phenomena of interpreting meaning from our crafted representations. We call these encoded semiotic signs. The small perspective change you creatives are making right now is in the realization that beyond any design or illustration aesthetic, you hold semiotic power in your creative hands. You may decide to design or illustrate A, B or C because you personally like that. However, as creatives, you are always creating outcomes for other people, not yourself. Other people have experiences and references they draw on. In the last episode, I asked how would you represent a dog if the audience has never experienced a dog. Let us now semiotically explore how. Okay, I am labouring the idea of dog here for obvious reasons. You can substitute dog for anything you wish. The following argument and explanation will remain relevant. Our audience has no experience of an existential thing as a dog. So there is no point in focusing your efforts in visualising a vast array of breeds to the audience. They will not understand. What in their lived experiences will help them to gain knowledge of dog? What qualities does a dog have that our audience are familiar with? We can semiotically use these to facilitate their understanding towards interpreting dog. A dog has a head, a body, 4 legs and a tail. These qualities in a familiar configuration can trigger our audience's perception. They can interpret the shape as a possible animal of some sort. We are semiotically mediating audience interpretations to the concept we are visually communicating. If the audience can only perceive a pattern of qualities, we interpret dog but they do not, then something is still being communicated. They can still be mediated to interpret a lesser meaning of maybe animal or mammal or beast. From our selection of qualities known to our audience, e.g. a leg shape, a head shape, etc., we help our audience to immediately perceive things that are already familiar to them. We mediate our audience to suggest a further meaning which they can confidently interpret. A dog is an animal, but it will semiotically take another final step to learn a new thing, such as a dog. But we are human. We learn new things all the time. Semiosis is built on perception to work. Creators focus on the representation of the concept. That is what you illustrate or design. You use various elements to construct a visual language to convey meaning. You visually communicate something to someone. This is what you do and what you have always done as designers and illustrators. If we want to, we can describe this as the signifier signified from Saussure's semiology. What is visualized is indicating what is meant. In semiosis, this is only 2/3 of pragmatic semiotic sign action. Your audience contributes to the final third of semiosis' power. What they perceive and interpret is a direct result of what the creative has created and what the audience already has experience of. To facilitate a target audience to understand what they see, the creative semiotically helps the audience to form their interpretations. The phenomenon of human perception is subconscious. Peirce describes 3 phenomenological states in which the audience, creative, and semiosis builds meaning within. The states of firstness, secondness, and thirdness. These 3 states help to structure how semiotic sign action grows in power from weak semiotic quality to visually communicate more complex meaning. Check out the YouTube playlist for more on these states and 10 semiotic sign classes. Or if you want to read more about this, then check out the Semiosis 1.1 semiotic resource on Ghost. Link is below in the description. With the perception and the lived experiences of our target audience, interpretation of the representation of the concept can be made. But is it visually communicating what is intended? Again, Peirce's semiosis offers frameworks to support the crafting of the creative's aesthetic to connect with the audience. A simple mark or a brushstroke to one person may suggest one thing, while another person may not get it. A brushstroke could suggest a tree, hair, the wind, texture, etc. This depends on the audience. After all, it is just a brushstroke, a mark. How can a simple mark suggest all those things to someone? In the context the brushstroke or mark is seen in, it shares familiar but weak qualities with something known to the audience. If the mark puts in the mind of the audience any of the suggested things, it is because the audience makes a weak connection based on their experience of things. Now, jumping to a well-known swoosh shape, the audience can agree that that shape now means Nike. How did interpretation jump so abruptly? I have just summed up the simple to complex power of semiosis with just shapes. The advantageous shift in a creative's mindset is when you realise that a simple mark, stroke, shape, etc. is a semiotic building block. Meaning is embodied and emerges from the interface between representation and interpretation. This facilitates audience perception to the intended concept. The small perspective change you can make comes from this pragmatic, experiential take on visual communicating. An applied framework of semiosis can augment and enhance any creative's tacit mindset to effectively improve visual communication. Peirce's philosophy offers you creatives a practical way to apply semiotics, but as his writing is obtuse, it is not immediately clear how to. That is why Semiosis 1.1 exists. So let us conclude on which perspective change you creators can make today. Peirce writes quite obtusely on quality sign this, representation that, and about states of firstness, secondness and thirdness. However, his triadic structure is beneficial to you. At a macro scale, you creators are happy with the triad of client, creative, audience. At a semiotic micro scale, the concept, representation, interpretation, determination flow is the power. Semiosis does not go around the triad once and ends. semiosis once triggered is perpetual. A successful interpretation brings the audience to the intended concept, then the semiotic determination flow goes around again. This is how weak qualities lead to complex semiotic meaning. Subscribe to Semiosis 101 to be notified when the next episode on this is published. Semiosis 101 producers on Patreon can watch all episodes months ahead of YouTube, plus other exclusive comments and a Semiosis 101 publisher credit. Hint, hint. See you all again for the next Semiosis 101 episode. Semiosis 101 is unique in helping illustrators and designers to semiotically enhance your visual communication skills. One designer-centric semiotic video at a time. Remember to hit subscribe to be notified when the next episode hits.